So good. Hey, what if the greatest danger to your faith isn't outright rebellion against God, but instead is the belief that between you and him, everything is fine? Now, every husband in this room at one point in their marriage has heard their wife say, "I'm fine." And for all you folks who aren't married yet, guys, she's not fine, okay? She's not fine. Now, that's the message that the prophet Amos gave to Israel almost 3,000 years ago. And today, our Heavenly Father is gonna show us, he's gonna give us a backstage pass to make sure that we don't drift away from him because we think everything is fine. And to kind of get us there, I wanna tell you about a time when I had a backstage pass. It was June 24th, 2014, and I was backstage at the Grand Ole Opry. Oh, it was so great. I got to experience what it was like to actually stand on stage as the curtain goes up and the lights come on. In fact, I took a video. Check this out. Now, listen, I know that wasn't real exciting for you, okay? But for me, in that moment, I'm telling you, all the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. It was a thrill of a lifetime. It was so incredible. Now, I got to walk through the artist entryway. That's the same door that Johnny Cash walked through. Yeah. In fact, I got to go past all the Opry members' plaques on the walls. And this was really cool. The lineup that night was awesome. The first band was a band called Riders in the Sky. They're a Grammy-winning band, and the lead singer, his name is Woody Paul. Now, Woody Paul is the guy that Pixar designed Woody from Toy Story after. And his band is the band that sings the song Woody's Roundup. It was so cool. And he looked exactly like Woody. Also, Ray Stevens was in the house. Don't look, Ethel! If you know, you know. She knows over there. I heard the chuckle. Terry Clark was there. If you don't know Terry, she sang Poor, Poor, Pitiful Me. And it was her first time singing at the Grand Ole Opry. Montgomery Gentry was there, and they sang My Town. And everybody was all patriotic and fired up about My Town. It was awesome. But the treat of the night was Charlie Daniels. And that night, the devil went down to Georgia. I got to meet all of the artists. The best part, though, was being backstage as the artist and the Opry House Band began to go through what they were gonna do on stage. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but if you're an artist and you're invited to sing at the Grand Ole Opry, you don't bring your band with you. You play with the Opry House Band. And Terry Clark, again, it was her first time playing, and she was really nervous. And I was like 5-10 feet away, and I got to see everything. The band comes over to her, and they're like, "Hey, Terry, can't wait to play with you tonight. We're gonna do this song. Is that right?" And she's like, "Yes." She goes, "Guys, I know that you are awesome, and you know what you're doing, but I'm really nervous. Would you be okay if we sang through my songs together?" And they're like, "Yeah, we'd love to." And boom, right there, it was awesome. Got to experience that. But when Charlie Daniels walked in, and he was gonna, prep everything with the band, he just walked up to him and went, "Hey, fellas, hey, when I do the solo with the fiddle, try and keep up." That was it. That was it. Now, I wish you could have been there that night, and actually, I wish I could show you the video that I took of the performance when I was sitting in the audience. I'm gonna put it on my social medias today. So, you can see it later, but it's a long video. We just don't have time for it right now. I'm telling you, when he gets to the fiddle solo, he walks over to the lead guitarist and he kind of gives him a look like, "You ready for what's about to happen?" And he just kind of starts teasing him with the fiddle, right? And then he just lets loose. And what was so awesome is the band kept up. It was great. And they nailed it. It was unbelievable. But what's so amazing was that if you weren't backstage and didn't see the challenge that he laid down, that moment on stage wouldn't have been as magical as it was for me, because I got a backstage pass. I got access that other people just didn't get. Well, listen, that's what this series is actually all about. It's about helping you get a backstage pass, access to some of the most amazing books in the Bible. Now, we've actually done this series before. We did Backstage Pass to the Miracles of Jesus. It was a great series. Some of you may remember that. But this Backstage Pass, let's just say we're going on tour with the Minor Prophets. Now, the reason we decided to go on tour with the Minor Prophets is because they're phenomenal books. I mean, these books, there's nothing minor about them, okay? I mean, we get to see the heart of God in these books, and we get to see people, live in faith. And I mean, it is incredible what we're gonna go through over the next, after today, 4 weeks. And I'm telling you, it's just gonna get better and better. But the best part is that, I mean, let's be honest, how many sermon series have you ever heard on the Minor Prophets? Not many, right? It just seems like that the Minor Prophets are things that we just kind of skip over. We're not gonna skip over them. We're gonna give you inside access, backstage pass to some amazing truths so that, this is what our prayer is, so that you will know the heart of God more. And so that you'll be able to take what you learn and put it into practice in your life so that your faith grows. That's what our desire is. So, you need to know a little bit about Amos. Amos is not the famous guy who makes cookies, okay? But Amos is the famous prophet. He lived and he prophesied from the year 760 to 750 BC. Now, it was a prosperous time in Israel. Their borders had expanded, their trade was generating ridiculous wealth, and there was peace. And even better for Israel, all the other surrounding nations, well, they weren't doing as good as Israel was doing. So it's in this time of peace and prosperity that Amos goes to be God's voice to God's people. So, let's ask ourselves, what lessons would I learn from being backstage with the minor prophet Amos? Well, here's the first one, fill this in. God often calls the ordinary to do the extraordinary. Now, if you were backstage with Amos, you would notice that there's nothing flashy about him. He was just a rancher who took care of fig trees. He was from a small town called Tekoa. It was about 10 miles south of Jerusalem. Now, listen to what Amos says about himself. This is in Amos 7, 14 through 15. He's just been challenged by a priest about his credentials, and this is how he responds. He says, Amos answered Amaziah, I was neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I was a shepherd, and I also took care of sycamore fig trees. But the Lord took me from tending the flock and said to me, go prophesy to my people Israel. Now, Amos just basically says, okay, you wanna know my qualifications? I was a shepherd and a fig tree farmer. I mean, he's just a regular working man. Unlike other prophets, he had no formal prophetic training. He wasn't the son of a prophet. He wasn't in the prophet union, okay? He's just an ordinary guy that God calls directly from his work to go and speak for the Lord. Maybe he didn't have formal training, but I have a hunch he may have graduated from the School of Hard Knocks, right? And I guarantee you that he had a really sharp mind. Now, if you were in the audience and not backstage, you would expect a prophet to be like this larger than life, really informed, trained person who's ready to go. But if you're backstage, you get the opposite picture of a guy like Amos. He's just a regular dude who has said, Yes, God, I'll do what you want me to do. He's just a regular guy. And you know what? I have a hunch that if we were backstage, we'd probably like him a whole lot. We'd probably be like, I can totally relate to you. I know I can. I mean, heck, I often joke around here. You've probably heard me say this. I had 4 great freshman years at the University of Georgia. C was for degree, okay? And here's the truth. I actually have dyslexia, and so school has always been really difficult for me. And I've always struggled with school. And then God asked me to move from Georgia to Portland to plant a church while I was going to school. And so I went from going to school kind of semi-part-time while I was planting a church. And then I met this really amazing woman named Jennifer, and we got married, and we started having kids faster than I could take classes, okay? And here's the deal. This is the truth. It took me 11 years to complete my bachelor's degree. I kept chopping wood, y'all, okay? And you know what? I even began a little bit of an MDiv degree, but after about, 25 of the last years or so, I decided to take a break, and it just isn't gonna happen. I can relate to Amos, but I know this. As a college student, God got a hold of my heart, and he asked me to become a pastor. And I remember when he called me into ministry, I was thinking to myself, God, are you sure about this? Because I'm not really qualified. In fact, I'm not really the kind of guy that you could really use. And surely there's people that are gonna be a whole lot better at this. I had my doubts. You know, that may have been the same thing with Amos. But you know what? I decided to say yes. I decided that I loved God more than anything, and so I was gonna say yes and follow him. And I've been doing my best to do that, and it led me here. I'm so thankful for him. But I know right now, you're sitting out in the chairs, and you're saying to yourself, there's no way God could use an ordinary person like me. But God uses ordinary people to do the extraordinary. I know what you're thinking. You're saying, Heath, I don't know the Bible well enough. I don't know the answers when people ask really hard questions. And you know what, Heath? You don't know what I've done. I'm disqualified. Let me tell you this. If you're thinking that right now, that didn't cut it for Amos, it didn't cut it for me, and it doesn't cut it for you. And if you need more proof that God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things, I want you to look around the room. Seriously, look around the room. Because sitting in this room right now are ordinary people who said yes to God's calling to lead a small group. There are people in this room that said yes to God's calling to be here on Tuesday or Wednesday night and serve kids. There are people in this room that hang out with teenagers because God asked them to. Heck, there are people that make coffee and give you donuts because God said to do that. And I know that the really godly and deserving people are out in the parking lot in the heat helping first-time guests figure out where to go because God called them to it. So don't think that you're too ordinary, that God could never do something extraordinary with you. Because also in this room is a man named John McMahon who served in VBS. And if you were to ask the kids that were in his classroom the difference that he made, they would say he means the world to us. And I know that there's another woman here named Charla Lindsay who leads a women's small group. And if you were to ask the women in her group what she means to them, they would say you can't measure it. And there's a man named Bill Nash who 20, 30 years ago, God asked him to start a camp for kids who had been through immense trauma who had lost siblings or parents to disease, whose parents were incarcerated, or kids who had been put into the foster care system because of incredible abuse. And Bill said yes. And if you were to ask any of the thousands of those kids what it means to them, they would say it's because of him saying yes that I've found healing and I've found salvation. So don't sit there and think that you're too ordinary for God to use. That's not the truth. Start saying, hey, Lord, how would you like to use me? How can I serve you? Help me to say yes. Because if you do, he'll do extraordinary things through your life. Here's the next thing that we learn from being backstage with Amos. Number 2, don't confuse being better than others with being right before God. Don't confuse being better than others with being right before God. I want to put a map on screen. This is a map of Israel and Judah in the time of Amos. Now, Amos, again, is from Tekoa. It's circled. You can see where that is. That's south of Jerusalem. It's west of the Dead Sea. It takes place during a part of Israel's history that's known as the divided kingdom. After King Solomon had died, there was a civil war in Israel, and the country divided into 2 kingdoms. In the south, there was Judah, and in the north, there was Israel, okay? Now, they didn't like each other. And what we're about to read, it all happens, or what we're about to kind of talk through happens in Amos chapter 1, verse 3 through chapter 2, verse 5. We don't have time to read all of that. I want you to go home and read the book of Amos this week, okay? You can do it. It's easy to do. It's not that big of a book. And you need to get into this story, but this is what happens. God calls Amos to leave Tekoa in the south to go to Judah in the north and prophesy. Now, again, they don't like each other, so you can imagine the folks are a little uneasy about this, right? I mean, here's this guy from the south coming up here to tell us about the north. Okay, let me put this in a way we can all relate to. We're Texans, right? I mean, let's be honest, Texas, when we compare Texas to all the other states in the United States, we tend to be more on the conservative side of things, right? And most Texans really like that, okay? Here's the other thing that you need to know about Texans, as if you didn't already know. We pretty much think we're better than all the other states. And we're right. Okay, sorry, not really sorry. That was a joke. It wasn't a joke. Okay. No, seriously. Don't get mad. Don't send me emails, okay? We're just playing here, all right? But let's imagine for a second that a godly man from California comes over here to Texas to speak to us about what's on God's heart. Now, come on, let's be honest. We'd be a little skeptical, wouldn't we? We'd be like, hey there, partner. Okay, we'll listen, but we'll see how this goes. Right? We're just waiting for one wrong thing and then get a rope. No, again, a joke, okay? But we'd be a little uneasy. Well, that's exactly what God asked Amos to do. And when he arrives up north, God has him speaking about the judgment that's coming to all the other nations that surround Israel. Like he says, Damascus has been really cruel, and Gaza has been taking part in human trafficking, and Edom has relentless hatred towards everyone, and Ammon is known for its brutality, and Moab just cares nothing about human dignity. So Amos is up there really hammering on all of Israel's enemies, right? And they're like, come on, brother, preach. You know, they're getting into it. They're like, yeah, we like this guy. But here's the thing, Amos was just setting them up because he really does have something for them to hear from God as well. See, Israel felt this false security with God because they were comparing themselves to what the other nations were doing. And when they compared themselves to what the other nations were doing, they're going like, yeah, we're not near as bad as them. We don't buy and sell people like Gaza does. We don't hate people like, we aren't brutal like. But then Amos, he turns the spotlight on Israel. And suddenly the sermon that they love to hear is the sermon now that they need to hear, where they're focusing on their own sins and they're having to realize that their own hearts are the ones that are actually corrupt as well. You know, we do the same thing, don't we? I mean, it's easy for us to feel righteous when we compare our lives to other people's sins, right? Because we're like, you know, I'm not like that immoral celebrity that's on the news. Or, you know, I'm not as bad as my coworker who is just a jerk. Or, you know, I never embezzled anything like this particular business person did. Or I'm not a godless Democrat or a Nazi Republican, so I'm better than them. I'm not an absentee parent, and certainly I'm better than all those people I watch on Dateline who murder their spouses, right? See, when we compare ourselves to others, it can make us feel spiritually healthy. It can make us feel like I'm fine with God when our heart is really drifting away from him. So don't compare yourself to other people, because God wants you to compare yourself to his standard of holiness that's found in his son, Jesus. And here's the deal, y'all. When we compare ourselves to Jesus, we all fall short. We all fall short. Listen, here's the next thing that Amos wants you to know if you were backstage with him. I can look devoted to God without actually walking with God. See, Amos, he drops this sobering truth that it's possible to look devoted to God without actually knowing him. And that's what Israel was doing. They were still gathering for worship. They were still celebrating all the festivals. They were still offering all the sacrifices. And on the outside, it seemed like everything was fine. But God saw what was happening inside in their hearts. And it was just people going through the motions, but their hearts were actually far from him. And that's our danger too, isn't it? I mean, we can attend church sometimes. We can be in a small group, at least when it's convenient. We can, we can serve every now and then. We can give a little bit, but deep down, there's really not much of a heart relationship going on with God. And people on the outside, they could see all your activity without knowing what's going on in your heart, and they could think, hey, they're a great Christian. When in reality, you've drifted away from God, and there's no growing, sustaining relationship being evidenced inside. See, this is why it's important for us to go backstage with Amos. He reminds us that God wants our hearts. He wants us to two-handed surrender our hearts to him. He wants us to pursue him and to grow in our relationship and our faith with him. It doesn't matter what's going on the outside. He wants what's on the inside. And so through Amos, he gives the nation of Israel 3 warnings that we can really put into practice in our life today. Here's the first. Make relationships more important than religion. Let's look at Amos 2, 6 through 7a. This is what the Lord says. The people of Israel have sinned again and again, and I will not let them go unpunished. They sell honorable people for silver and poor people for a pair of sandals. They trample helpless people in the dust and shove the oppressed out of the way. Listen, a big sign that Israel had drifted away from the heart of God was the way that they treated people. Profit had become more important and more valuable than people. The powerful were taking advantage of the vulnerable, and they were exploiting them. And the same temptation is for us today is, look, I get it. We don't buy and sell people today, right? But when you feel tempted to prioritize your success over your integrity, when you prioritize convenience over compassion or profit over people, you're moving away from the heart of God. Israel had it backwards. We can as well. Amos is warning us that our Monday through Saturday behavior needs to line up with our heart and our Sunday behavior. Here's the second warning he gives. Genuine obedience is more important than participation. Let's read Amos 5:21 through 24. I hate all your show and pretense, the hypocrisy of your religious festivals and solemn assemblies. I will not accept your burnt offerings and grain offerings. I won't even notice all your choice peace offerings. Away with your noisy hymns of praise. I will not listen to the music of your harps. Instead, I want to see a mighty flood of justice, an endless river of righteous living. See, God looked at the spiritual devotion of his people and he said, I hate all your show and pretense. I mean, Israel was doing all the religious activity, but they were doing it without the heart, and God hated it. See, when worship becomes disconnected from obedience, it misses the mark. They believed that their church attendance could make up for their dishonest and disobedient living, and it can't. The danger for us today is that we go through the motions, but our heart isn't close to God. He wants us to have transformed hearts. He wants us to worship him in our worship that produces love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness and self-control. Okay, here's the third warning. My calling to follow Christ is more important than my comfort. Let's look at Amos 6, verse 1, and then verses 4 through 6. What sorrow awaits you who lounge in luxury in Jerusalem, and you who feel secure in Samaria. You are famous and popular in Israel, and people go to you for help. How terrible for you who sprawl on ivory beds and lounge on your couches, eating meat of tender lambs from the flock of choice calves fattened in the stall. You sing trivial songs to the sound of the harp and fancy yourselves to be great musicians like David. You drink wine by the bowlful and perfume yourselves with fragrant lotions. You care nothing about the ruin of your nation. This final warning is that Israel was living in comfort and luxury, but they didn't care about the state of their nation. They'd become comfortable and complacent. Their wealth had made them indifferent. It's almost like they had this attitude of, well, as long as I'm going to heaven, I don't care if anybody else goes to hell. Let me tell you this. One of the greatest threats to your faith is not hardship. It's actually comfort. Because when life is good, you don't depend on God. You don't need God. And Amos reminds us that comfort can be a distraction. Drift happens the moment that you're more concerned with your personal comfort than you are in knowing God. It happens the moment that you're more satisfied with your blessings than you are for his presence. If that's you today, you need to give your heart back to God. You need to let him know that you're willing to sacrifice whatever it is that you need to sacrifice so that you can truly stay in step with his heart. So let me ask this. How does the backstage pass with Amos end? Because so far it's been a little hard-hitting, hasn't it? Well, if you were in the audience, you might feel that his message was full of judgment and full of God's wrath. But if you're backstage with Amos, and if you look and dig close enough, scattered throughout the entire book is the heart of God that says you don't have to endure the judgment. Return to me. Give me your heart. Let me be in charge of your life and you will prosper. Amos 5:4 says, seek me and live. Amos 5:6 says, seek the Lord and live. Amos 5:14 says, seek God, not evil, that you may live. And then Amos 7:3, after Amos is telling them about the judgments that are coming because of their sin, he says if they repent and return to God, this will not happen, the Lord said. See, God's heart is so clearly wanting his people to return to him. And the same is true for you today. He doesn't want you to think everything is fine. He wants you to know that you've been redeemed and restored and that you have a relationship that is rock solid in Jesus with him. So, I know from personal experience that when you give your heart to God, he receives it and he begins to do the extraordinary. Listen, if you're here today and you aren't a Christ follower, you need to understand that outside of being in a relationship with Jesus, you are in the judgment of God. But you don't have to be. Because when God sent Jesus, Jesus lived a perfect life so that he could be the perfect sacrifice for you. When Jesus died on the cross, he paid the penalty for sin. And if you believe that he died for you, and if you ask him to forgive you, and if you make a commitment to let him have control of your life, you will be redeemed and restored in your relationship with God. And you can do that today by praying a prayer of faith. And we have a sample prayer of faith that you can pray in your message notes. And listen, if you pray that, I want you to text the word Christ to 50906, or you can come down to the front here at the end of the service. We have a decision team that would love to help you take your next steps of faith. Do it today because God wants to do something extraordinary through your ordinary life.